While most MSPs are out there hunting endlessly for new clients, the smart ones know their richest opportunities lie in the fields they already own. My name's James Steele and this is Harvest, where MSPs and industry experts share proven ways to grow profitable revenue from your current customer base. No theory, no fluff, just field-tested strategies that work. Let's grow.
We were so used to the phone ringing that suddenly it sounded like crickets. If you really want to be an MSP, then no one customer should be able to create a mortality event for your business. In 34 years of business, I have never hired a salesperson. I was a jerk to work for it because I was sweating all these things and I was just passing that on to my team. We have embraced the concept of I don't like this. There's always room for a best-in-class provider. And the best-in-class restaurants are smaller and they're full. If you're doing what you enjoy doing, then you don't need to flee for the exits. Be so good that your brand sells itself. You should be making a smaller profit and getting yourself out of the day-to-day.
Hey, thanks for joining me for this episode of Harvest. If you're an MSP leader and you're running around like a headless chicken, trying to keep up with things, well, listen, I think you need to take a listen to Harold Mann, who brings the zen, who really has found a way to find the love from running an MSP business. He's the CEO of Mann Consulting. He's a San Francisco MSP leader with a 5.8 million turnover and a global team. He's built his thriving business without ever hiring a salesperson by doubling down on operational excellence and client trust. In this episode, you're going to hear field-tested tips for boosting profitability, dealing with anchor clients, those big whales that you don't want to rely too much on, building a resilient team culture, and why just being around wins more business than pushy sales tactics. Don't miss this one. You're going to need a notepad. It's right up there with one of my favorites. It's a longer episode than normal because I just couldn't edit it down. There was just too much gold. So enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side. So a huge welcome, Harold Mann from Mann Consulting. It is a pleasure to have you on, CEO. And before we dive into your wealth of experience, the first thing I need to ask from you, as I do with all my guests, is what's a misconception about you? What do people get wrong about you when they first meet you, Harold?
Well, a lot of people, thank you for having me, by the way. A lot of people, the first thing they say when they meet me is, oh, I thought you were much older, which I think is a compliment. Let me think about it. Misconceptions. I would have to say people probably think I'm very good with technology and very smart and very hardworking. And spoiler alert, I'm actually an extremely lazy person, which I think I have been able to channel using my secret ADD and ADHD skills to actually use that to create a scalable business. Because if you're lazy enough, what's the old expression? If you want to have something done quickly or efficiently, give it to a lazy person. So I think the misconception would be that I'm hardworking. I am hardworking, but I'm extremely lazy, if that makes sense.
That tells me that's exactly what we need for this show, because it's a relatively small, actionable show. And so you're going to be able to tell us the shortcuts to get to the results, because that's what you've managed to do extremely well in your business. So that's not a problem here, Harold, not at all. So let's dive into it. In terms of the operations side, now I know that's an area that you're very strong. I'm keen to know, is there any kind of step change that you've made sort of operationally in your business over the years? You've been running for 30 years now. That's really made a significant kind of impact in terms of the sort of the profitability and kind of efficiency of the business, would you say?
Yeah, I would say if you're in a business long enough, you get a really big inventory of things you don't like in the business. And those are the silent killers which will actually get you to burn out. And so once I started paying attention to the things that I just didn't like, that were just sort of causing me grief, I would focus on what can I do to not have to deal with those. So one of them is big, complex proposals. I don't like doing them. It's just a lot of work. And if the clients are only going to approve them, 60% of the time, then you're just spinning your wheels a lot of the time. So one example is I just stopped making fancy proposals and I just presented a one pager and said, here it is. And surprisingly enough, it didn't really change. If anything, it actually improved the response rate because clients just saw it and they said, okay, looks good. And I found that by not putting all that extra work in, I wasn't frustrated as much when clients chose not to say yes. So sometimes just doing less actually ends up yielding better results. As a matter of fact, I think when any clients feel like you're pushing them, they will have an inherent resistance to that. And so when I found anything where we were pushing clients, we were actually pushing them away. And so when we stopped pushing them and we just said, you know what, we're here, let us know when you're ready, it became a softer sell and it became an easier sell, less work for us and less pressure for the customer. And I think that had a win-win result.
And how did the sales process look then? I'm curious as to how that would have gone. If that was you're just producing like a one pager, where do you put your time? Where do you sell yourself essentially? Sell it what it is you do so well. Where does that come in and how does that look for you guys?
We're very fortunate. We're based in San Francisco, California, which, as you know, for many years, decades, was a hotbed of innovation and high tech startups and software industry. So for us, it was a very target rich environment, if you will. So because of the density of our market, we were playing defense for many years just with the phone ringing, people saying, hey, I heard about you from so and can you help us? So we did not grow up as a business with a sales mindset. As a matter of fact, we grew up with a more of a how are we going to handle all this opportunity mindset. So that sort of shaped our business. I would say that our our general approach then was how can we just take as much of the business that's coming our way in a way that's not going to just cause us to collapse from the stress of handling it all. So early on, I found myself not particularly drawn to the customer side, the sales side, and I instead was focused meticulously on service delivery and how we could make sure we do a good job of delivering service to all of these companies. So I say that shaped our emphasis on operational excellence and away from sort of that traditional sales mindset. Unfortunately, that did not prepare us for contractions in the market, right? So when the market corrected, whether it be the dot com or financial meltdown, all that stuff, we were so used to the phone ringing that suddenly it sounded like crickets, and so that was a little bit tricky for us. I think had we started the business during a less frothy time or a more quiet period, we would have had a more traditional sales mindset, which I think is good for any business that's starting out.
I'm really glad you said that because I'm sure a lot of MSPs listening will be thinking, well, that's wonderful. You've got more business than you know what to do with, and you're not going out there to do
Right.
anything about getting it. This is not what I need to hear. But there was a shift. So I have to ask them, which elements of the business did you change in order to sort of weather that pullback?
Yeah. So we had what they call an anchor tenant, which is a very high percentage of our revenue concentrated in a single client. There was a day, that client called up and said, hey, by the way, we've decided to hire a few of your employees and we'd like to, pay the no rating fee and end our agreement with you. And so that was a bad day, as you can imagine.
Mm.
And so that was one of those never again moments where I did not want to have to wait up at night wondering, well, if that main client of mine goes away, what do I do? So for any MSPs that are, currently have a key client, that's a problem. There's just no other way to put it. You work for that company. You don't have an MSP, I'm afraid. You just are an employee for that company and you just happen to have a fancy letterhead, right? So if you really want to be an MSP, then no one customer should be able to create a mortality event for your business. What that meant is one of the critical metrics for me every year, which I generally am calculating on New Year's Eve because I'm closing up my reports, is what percentage of our top 20 clients, what does our top 20 clients, what does that comprise as a percentage of business? And what is the percentage of our largest client as a share of revenue? As long as that number keeps going down below 10%, you're in good shape. If there's a single client that is above 10% of your revenue, then be careful. That's all I could say.
That's an excellent piece of actionable advice for sure. Don't have a whale that you rely on that to that extent. And there's a number of ways that you could tackle that issue. You can go out there and get a whole load of more customers and play it that way, or you can start to level up and maybe develop some of the other companies. In your time, have you focused on increasing the sort of the wallet share, as it were, on the other companies perhaps in your portfolio where you've only done a small amount of work? Is there anything that you think's worked in that regard?
So in 34 years of business, I have never hired a salesperson. I'm not bragging. I'm just sharing. It is not an area where it does not give me passion.
This is why I'm
It
on the
does not
MSP
give me,
sales show, Harold. This is exactly the
there you go.
reason.
Uh, it does not give me passion. It did not give me joy. As a matter of fact, I don't like the rejection that happens so frequently in the process. And I also don't like the back and forth, the redlining. When I bought my car, I bought a car that was the price was what it was. There was no haggling. And that's always been sort of my preference because I don't like that dance. Many people do. I don't like the back and forth. And so we 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 decided we're just going to do a little bit of work with a lot of companies. And while we're doing that work, as long as we do a good job, those people will, what we notice is they'll just start asking you for more. And if you do a good job with lunch, they might ask you, "Hey, can we have some dessert?" And then suddenly you can add dessert onto the menu. And if you do a good job with lunch and dessert, maybe they'll ask you for Sunday brunch. And I think your menu can organically expand if you're focused on delighting your customer. It sounds very bland. I know it's very easy to say, and the devil is in the details. But if you really focus on delighting the customer, then all you got to do is just be around. And then a lot of those other projects and opportunities will just organically happen. I've seen that happen because I know we didn't build, a structured upsell process, which by the way works, but you have to really then invest in the process and commit to the process and run the process routinely. We do some of that now. We'll say, "Hey, what are you doing for backup? What are you doing as a secondary ISP?" We'll ask them, and we have a process that we've built, but it's not a process that is predicated on sales. It's more predicated on communication. Saying, "What are you doing for this?" They tell us, and if they're doing the good thing, we'll say, "Great." And if they're doing the wrong thing, we say, "That's not a good idea." And then we'll send them a proposal on what they should do. And then if they say no, that's okay too. That used to piss me off when they would do the wrong thing. I get annoyed. And getting annoyed with them does not encourage them. Just like parenting, getting annoyed with your kids if they do the wrong thing does not make them feel good, does not make them want to do the right thing. But being patient with them, being there when they're ready, I found that's a more organic way to get clients to build that trust in that relationship.
I love that analogy. As a parent of two small boys, I can definitely relate. But also, as a business owner, there has to be some element of structure around it because as a parent, you know to circle back, you know to put some sort of guardrails in place to try and sort of get them, potentially to move down a particular path of whatever that might be, the right choice. So, is there anything you can
Yes.
think of that you put in place maybe that's like that sort of, I guess maybe from an operational side, like how frequently you talk to people, how you or what you have to offer them maybe as well, what it is you're trying to get them to do.
Yeah. You know, there's so many things to talk about with a customer, and sort of like on the first date, you don't want to cover all 30 things that matter, right? That's gonna push them away. And it's a conversation, but you gotta be patient. The whole reason your MSP exists is because customers don't know how to do it correctly. And so that is why they need you. And if they knew how to do everything correctly, then there would be very little need for MSPs. So keeping that in mind and not getting annoyed when they do the wrong thing goes a long way. Just like back to the parenting, if your little one of your little boys is about to do the wrong thing and hurt themselves, you have a choice, right? You could just stop them, or you could watch from the sideline and sort of wince a little bit as they scrape themselves and go into that "I told you so" mode. But if you did tell them, "Hey, watch out, you're going to hurt yourself," and then you allow them to hurt themselves, and you don't say "I told you so, you idiot." Instead you just sort of say, "I love you. I'm here for you if you need my help," and your credibility goes up. And when your credibility goes up in business, that's gold. That's more important than sales, because that means they're going to come to you the next time there's an issue. And the next time you say, "Hey, by the way, Billy, you're going to hurt yourself," it means a little bit more because you were proven right. So every time you get an opportunity to prove yourself right to the customer, the value of your sales, I think, goes up. And so when clients do the wrong thing, that used to bug me. And then I sort of achieved a bit more of a inner peace with it. And now I say, that's not a good idea, because I was taking care of my frustration. I didn't like it. I would go to bed going, "Oh God, these guys are not doing the right thing." So taking care of my own annoyance, articulating that to them in the form of a, "You're going to be sorry," a CYA letter, a cover your ass letter, say, "Hey, this is not a good idea."
Yes.
It's actually good. It's actually good practice in the MSP world. I mean, obviously, attorneys do this every day. Doctors do this every day. You don't get the surgery. They say, "Okay, this is against medical advice." Of course, they don't want to get sued. If there were more litigation in our industry, I think MSPs would do a better job, as a matter of fact. I'm not encouraging it. I'm just saying that litigation gets you to really focus on risk management and risk communication. So if the client's doing the wrong thing, tell them that's not a good idea. Send them the quote. Don't shove it down their throat. Don't get annoyed if they say no. Just say, "Okay, when you're ready." And then if the stuff hits the fan because they didn't listen, your credibility goes up. Now you look like you just told the future. And that means that next conversation you have with them, they're going to listen a little bit more, because in the back of their minds, they know you were right. So I think you do enough of those over enough categories, then you become truly a trusted advisor. Everybody talks about trusted advisor. We are the trusted advisor. Well, you don't just get that off the bat. You earn that. But you don't have to earn it by always doing the right thing. You could actually earn it by them doing the wrong thing, and you just being there, just like a parent, going, "I care for you. I don't think that's a good idea," and letting them hurt themselves rather than you somehow muscling your way in there to try and prevent it from happening.
What I'm hearing is that the experience that you have has got you to a point where you're pretty zen about this stuff and you can take a pretty pragmatic view. How does that work with your team? Because that's not an easy thing to pass down. How does your team look, who are sort of the customer facing team, who, although they're not overtly selling, they are in a way having these conversations? How is your team set
Yep.
up, and how do you get that to sort of flow through them too?
I'm smiling because I'm thinking back to so many team members that I lost over decades because I didn't have this Zen, didn't have this understanding, and I was a jerk to work for it because I was sweating all these things and I was just passing that on to my team. Not a healthy thing to do. Any of my former employees, I'm sorry.
I think
I
this is
would
official.
say,
Yeah.
I would say four simple words that you build into your culture for all of your team, and you encourage it rampantly and constantly. "I don't like this." If you can get your team to feel comfortable sharing that internally, you can do anything. I really mean that. We have embraced the concept of "I don't like this." So suppose a customer just said, "Go ahead and turn off our Google Workspace instance. We have migrated the domain and now we're ready to go." And the IT technician is worried that maybe they missed a file or two, or they didn't check the backup, or didn't make sure everything transferred over. If there's a scintilla of fear or worry that they're doing the wrong thing, if you can just say, I don't like this, take that and then mention it internally, share it with your team, and then figure out what to do with it. Because that I don't like this actually means something. It just is a kind of anxiety, right? Which is living in the future. Just connect it to the present, communicate it to the client. And then what you're doing in that moment is, the old secure your air mask first. You're really taking care of yourself and then you're helping them. And in the process, you're doing better work. You're actually doing better risk mitigation.
And it's actually freedom, isn't it? You're talking about there. It's kind of freedom to express concerns that you're having, which is so important. If you bottle those up, then it's only going to lead to problems.
And back in the day when humans congregated together before COVID, we would sit at the water cooler at the pub afterwards and talk about what morons the clients were, right? Oh, those idiots, right? Well, it's actually the same kind of thing. It's frustration with the client doing the wrong thing. It is the equivalent of a I don't like this, but it is manifested in a very unhealthy way, whether it be drinking or smoking or just complaining. None of that actually helps the client. So if you take the I don't like this concept and you actually turn that into a conversation with the customer, or maybe just a letter or an email to the customer saying this is not a good idea, what you're doing is actually you're doing them a service. And so I think if you channel it properly with your team, it's great. And then you feel better. And you know what? Suppose they still do the wrong thing. At least you can sleep at night. And we as IT people, if you look at them, they're not the healthiest bunch, right? They don't exactly look like they run marathons. We're not good at putting ourselves first. We don't take care of ourselves first. We eat in between appointments when we have a quick chance to. And so self-care will also help make you enjoy the career longer, be able to do the work longer. It feels weird depending on how you're brought up. If you're brought up that the word selfish is a bad word, it's going to feel weird to put yourself first. But I have seen too many IT people fall on a sword because they put the client first and they didn't put themselves first and they didn't do anything with that feeling that, oh man, this customer's doing the wrong thing. That's actually gold. And yet they're used to saying, oh, those idiots, they're not going to do the right thing. They're not smart. You know, don't don't fault them for not understanding. They don't know, you know. Help them be successful. They might have to bruise, they might have to scrape their knees a little bit. They might have to get malware before they finally realize that the software is going to help them. But be patient, work with them, but keep an ear out for that. Do I like this? That for me has been transformative, not only for my own stress, but for our team. And our team appreciates it because when you're encouraged to complain in your business, that's a very positive thing if you channel it right.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's mega empowering, and it's probably going to set you up for success in the future, isn't it? Thank you. That's a really good insight on the sort of especially the sort of team culture side of things. This episode is sponsored by Sales Builder, where I work. I really wanted to tell you about us because I see so many MSP sales teams buried in admin instead of talking to customers and building relationships. We help you automate your sales process with standardized product catalogs and professional proposals. Our service matrix, or the white space module, that's the bit that shows you visually where the opportunities are in your customer base, from service gaps to upcoming renewals. Everything links directly with your PSA and, of course, your distributors. If you'd like to free up your sales team's time and spot more revenue opportunities, simply connect with me on LinkedIn or head to salesbuilder.com. Let's get back to it. Getting back to the numbers a little bit now, but you've sort of made a change within the business where you've really increased profitability perhaps over the years. So you talked about maybe the efficiency side of things, so getting rid of some of the things you didn't like doing. But are there areas where you think, okay, doing that change really helped us? It might be packaging and pricing, it might be the process you go through, anything along those lines that you can tell people listening perhaps who might want a sort of like some sort of actionable tip around that.
Yeah, yeah. The can we call you when we need you? That was that was very tempting. Meaning clients saying, "We don't want to commit. Can we just call you when we need you?" Early on, it's very tempting to say yes because you literally have someone saying, "I want to hire you, but I only want to hire you when I need you." Once we had enough of a backbone to say, "No, you got to work with us ongoing." We had many clients walk away because they just were commitment phobic,
Mm-hmm.
but the ones who stayed enabled us to invest in people and resources and other things that we wouldn't be able to do because there was no predictability. It's very hard to invest in your business if you have no idea of how much revenue you're going to get in the coming months. So forcing clients to be on some sort of commitment was I think a helpful tool. It was not easy. I was fearful of, turning away customers, but it ended up being the right thing. And it's really fun when they come back, because they do try it, and then they go, okay, yeah, you were right. As a matter of fact, I think it's more gratifying in my business to have a customer to say to me, I know you said this would happen, or you were right. That's more valuable to me than a customer just signing a big proposal, because that credibility
Yeah.
transcends any one sale. That is a very long, that's a lifetime value kind of proposition as opposed to just a purchase order.
It goes back to what you were saying earlier, doesn't it? I mean, that's almost like, I don't like this, that you're only going to engage with me on the one time, and that's not going to be efficient for my business, and it's not going to work for you. So it's having that ability to say no.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels to just interpersonal things, whether it be the parenting that I mentioned or the dating process. In the sales process, I mean, if you just sort of come on really strong, you're going to push people away, just like you would if you were just dating somebody. That you want there to be a page. You want to be comfortable enough where you don't feel the need to just vomit all your value onto the tabletop while you're meeting with them for the first time. Like, go slow, have some intrigue.
What do you lead
It's very
with?
much a
I know it's
courtship.
I know it's horses for
Yeah,
courses, but what do you lead with? Is there anything you'd sort in a meeting? Is there some way that you'd start off a client meeting?
I'm still bad at this. I still feel compelled to just share so much value with them.
Yeah.
And probably because I see all those places where we can help. And just like a good therapist or a good parent, a patient parent, if you play the long game, you don't have to be in a rush. You can go slower. So what I lead with is too much. If I'm really being candid with you, James, I'd say lead with listening, lead with hearing what it is that they want to do, or hear what it is they don't want to replicate if they're coming to you from a distressed relationship from another MSP. A lot of people, you know, if you're dating a new company, they just got out of a relationship or they're in a relationship that's not working. That's a hard courtship, right? So sometimes people just want to make sure that you're not going to just be a bad partner. If it's the first time around, there's a lot of education there. That can be a process. But most of the time, I think people are finding an MSP because they are not happy with what's going on. And so that has its own set of challenges. If they're outgrowing their own employees trying to do it themselves, that's a different set of challenges. But what do I lead with? I lead with too much. If I'm being honest, I just start going, oh yeah, we can help with that. We can help with that. I should probably hire a salesperson. Is what I should do.
Well, listen, it got you to a reasonable point, I would say, in the business's history. One of the areas that you can really find yourself in problems, I think, as an MSP, is when you go into one of those meetings and you say, yes, I can help you with all these things, but also they want lots more. And I hear this talked about a lot at the moment, the remit of an MSP. And this is sprawling now, obviously, with the advent of AI and how to use it, productivity tools and so on. I'm interested to know, what do you do to keep a sort of a reasonable handle on the services that you offer, and how do you sort of draw a line in places to say, okay, well that's chargeable, that's not. Just a general kind of idea of how do you cope with all there's so much asked of an MSP and it's only going to increase.
Well, early on in our business, we made a choice to simply charge for our time, much like a attorney or a CPA.
Okay.
We have avoided the unlimited, the all you can eat model for our entire business existence. What that did is that avoided the conflict of interest, which was, if it's an all you can eat thing and they start using you a lot, that can be problematic. Like, hey, get off the phone. Every minute longer you spend with a customer, that impacts our profitability. So we got rid of that conflict of interest early on by simply charging for our time. So we try and have a very short menu. Now, because of our marketplace, we grew up as a very Mac dominant business. So we have somewhat of a niche, which is already sort of self-selecting. Although we have, probably thousands of PCs under management. We have many more Macs under management. But our menu is pretty small. As a matter of fact, it's small primarily because a lot of the key employees on our team just want to work with best in class and they don't want to work with average solutions. As a result, they said, I don't want to work on that. And if you force people to work on stuff they don't want to work on, they will leave eventually. So I leaned into the preferences of my team. That then basically created the menu, which is very short, best in class solutions. And the customers that gravitate toward that, great. The ones who don't, that's okay. And then hopefully down the road, they gravitate towards those solutions. So, in other words, a short menu, you have a better chance at success by only selling solutions that you love,
That's really
which really
powerful.
goes
Yeah.
back to that. It goes back to that. Do I like this? Right. If a client wants you to use their PF Sense firewall and your techs don't like it, well, that's a lose-lose right there. Sure, it might be cheaper, but your team doesn't like it. Client's gonna have problems with it. It's not worth it. Just get the best in class one. It's less work for us.
But aren't you turning away business? Lots of it.
Yes, and this is why the density of our market enables us to do that. I realize if you're in a small area, a small market, you may feel like you don't have that luxury. What I will tell you is there's there's always room for a best in class provider, and the best in class restaurants are smaller and they're full and they're profitable and their staff are not running around like maniacs because it's engineered for everyone to have a good experience, the restaurant guests as well as the staff. You pay a fortune, you wait months for a table, but they figured out if we make it easier for our staff to deliver service, then we have a better chance of delivering great service. And conversely, if you if you try and just take all comers, have a huge restaurant, have your wait staff running around like maniacs, that's a lose-lose. They're tired, things are falling through the cracks, and all you're doing is patching up holes in the boat every every service because it's very hard to keep track of that. So if I'm sure someone's going, yeah, well, that's great. You've got hundreds of businesses that you're helping. I've only got 20. Just do the very best work. And if that means getting rid of 5 of those 20 customers, that's okay because you will replace them over time with 5 better ones and 10 and 20 and 40 more.
I'm assuming you're charging more than most from what you're telling me. You're not competing on price necessarily. Is there any conversations that you have? Do you get pushback on the price there, or do you just find that, okay, you talked about the fact you hate negotiating. How does a typical conversation go if you put your sort of offering down and the customer says, oh, hang on a minute, well, I know you're premium, but don't really like that pricing. Do you just literally say, right, okay, fine, that's it? Or do you sort of say, well, actually, this is why we charge what we do. This is why we're better. Is there any sort of real pitch you have for that sort of differentiation in your business?
Yeah, I actually don't think we charge a lot. As a matter of fact, there are 1 and 2 person consultancies that charge more on an hourly basis than we do. I
Okay.
think we have some good operational efficiency
Hmm.
that enables us to do that. I'm sure we could make more if we just charged more. I I like to deliver value because then I don't have to convince people of value. So I think people will sometimes say, "Oh, you guys are great value," and I like that. There is truth to the old good, fast, cheap, pick two, adage. I would say you want to charge. I mean, there's always going to be somebody complaining about price, no matter what you charge.
Of course.
As long as you feel good about the value and deliver on the value, then I think you don't have to continually be. It's very common to say raise your rates, continue to raise your rates, but that's easy to do. It's having people feel like they're getting good value while you're doing that is the hard part. So I would just focus on that part and then just make sure that everything pencils out in terms of expected profitability. And don't take the can we just call you when we need you clients. Those are going to drive you crazy because they expect to get a seat at your restaurant without being a regular. And they're furious if they walk in at 6:30 and they can't just sit down. Well, that's not how restaurants work. You want your own favorite table in the corner, you got to be a regular.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, that's no good for reputation either, is it? Because you have these small interactions, and then they go off and speak badly, and then it's just it's just going to all unfold. I think you've given me, in a very short space of time, Harold, I feel like you've given me a really good insight into how you sort of conduct your business. And I think people will be able to learn from that. There's a certain confidence, I think, that comes from having been in business for so long. Some people just starting out will say, oh, fair enough, that's quite difficult for me to do at this stage. But it's something to aspire to, I think. And that confidence in what you offer, saying no, picking the right customers. Obviously, you've got a niche that's developed there as well. There's a lot of ingredients there. I can see why you've been so successful. Can I ask you a question from our previous guest? This is a segment we call Pass the Pitchfork. And it was Barb Paluskowicz from CDN Technologies over there in Ontario. And she was asking, Harold, do you have an exit strategy and how are you gearing up for that, if so?
Well, I'm pausing or I'm stammering because if you're doing what you enjoy doing, then you don't need to flee for the exits. And so if every day you're working more towards what you enjoy doing, then we don't need to romanticize this concept of exit strategy. Now, look, it's nice to be able to think about retiring and having enough money to, not have to work and all those things. So, yeah, at some point, we will say, you know what, it's time to move on and pass the torch. But my challenge right now is just to continue to build the best possible business. And if we do that, it will just acquire value because of that. There's value in brand. My first job out of college was at a famous ad agency called Chiat Advertising, which did the 1984 commercial for Apple. You probably heard about that.
Mm-hmm.
That company was just steeped in excellence, and they handed out a book, A Passion for Excellence by Tom Peters early on when we started. So I'm answering this in a somewhat circuitous fashion, but I would say my exit strategy is make the business as valuable as it can be so that when I'm just tired of working, then we can just find a suitor for it. I really think, I mean, of course, yeah, you know, get a high percentage of MRR, have a lot of recurring business, don't have too much project, but there's all these formulas, 30 minutes on YouTube and you can get all of the techniques for it. But
Yes.
I would say exit strategy, it, really think about what is it you don't have that would cause you to flee for the exits. If you just hate your business, well, I guess that's a kind of exit strategy, which is just get out as quickly as you can. But if you love your business, well, why do you need a strategy for exit? Right? It's sort of like saying to someone who's married, what's your divorce strategy? Right? Like, well, you don't need a divorce strategy if you have a good thing going. Right. So I would say, look, I'm all about value and appreciating in values, but I work on it every day, and I'm passionate about improving service so that people will just find us. I heard years ago that Krispy Kreme, which is, I don't know if you have that in the UK, you
We
probably
do,
don't, but
yeah.
it's a
It's made it over
don't,
here.
oh, you do?
Another
Oh,
export,
very
yeah.
good. So apparently they were able to get somewhat inexpensive locations because they were so sought after. People would go to Krispy Kreme because it was Krispy Kreme. So that's clearly brand value. And that enabled them operationally to run more profitably because they didn't have to get the most expensive real estate for their locations. So I think that's a strategy, right? Be so good that your brand sells itself. And similarly, I guess to answer your question finally, our exit strategy is to be so good that companies will vie for bidding for us one day when it's time for us to finally, you know, sell the business. But I don't feel this sort of rush for the exit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. And I think a large part of this is because you've probably got quite a good handle on all those things that you mentioned that you might find on YouTube, and certainly just talking about things like not over relying on one customer and just doing the right thing. I think that sets you up naturally. I think there are a number of differences between running the business and maybe marriage. I think there's an inevitability to, and also the possibility that health and all that, health reasons and that kind of stuff, that you might end up thinking, okay, I need to be in a good place. But I think ultimately what you're saying is the value is there. You're doing the right thing anyway, so the value is inherently in the business.
Yeah, I want to say something. I meet maybe 2 to 3% of our customers myself. So many years ago, I realized this doesn't work if it's just about me. And if I were to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't put my name on the door, even though that's very good for accountability. It doesn't it doesn't scale well if that's what they're expecting to get. So I love the fact that most clients don't meet me. That means there's something bigger than me. So that if my heart exit strategy is a cardiac arrest, it doesn't mean like suddenly the company has no value. I, I don't want that to happen. But if you're integrally tied to the actual product, then that's going to make it much harder for you to achieve these things. And I know everybody and their mother says work on the business, not in the business. It's a very trite, easy thing to say, but there is truth to that. And it's not a lot of people, especially the smaller MSPs, are going to think, well, I don't have that luxury. And I understand that. But it would be better for you to engineer yourself out of the day to day rather than think that somehow one day you're just going to be able to not do that. It's not that simple. We did it out of playing defense. We had to hire more people. So if you're in a market or in a growth where you're not feeling like you can justify hiring more people, put yourself in that obligation. So it forces you to step back from the day to day so that you can then grow your business.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. How did you get to that stage? Did you just you progressively engineered it then, from what you're saying? So you by bringing new people on, because the trap is always, and there's so many MSPs I talk to, the trap is always it's owner-led sales, and that then just evolves, and you've got a job to do to pass on a relationship
Yeah.
and so on. You brought in additional people and never had that reliance, or just did it to start with?
So one of the first things I told you is I'm a lazy person. So I quickly started identifying things I didn't like doing, and there's a lot of things in IT that one cannot like doing, whether it be plugging in cables or just, dealing with a lot of requests. So I definitely played to that strength. And I tried to figure out, well, if I don't have to be the one that does it, maybe someone else can. And fortunately, we were in a market that had a lot of talent and eager folks. So really, for your MSPs that are listening right now, there's a lot of people who would love to work. And so you really do have an amazing opportunity to hire not only locally, but globally to do a significant amount of service delivery. Will that impact your margins? Absolutely. Are you getting thick margins? You're making too much profit. You should be making a smaller profit and getting yourself out of the day to day. So I would say what I did is I didn't have a plan, James. I didn't like go, okay, well, on June, I'm going to stop doing this. In
Hmm.
July, I just stopped doing it because I didn't like it. And probably in the back of my head, there was this sort of like, if you keep doing this, you're just going to burn out. And so you really got to pay attention. It goes back to that, do I like this? You got to pay attention to the stuff you don't like and engineer that out with other resources. Hire someone else to do it. Yes, you will make less money per hour, but you will feel better. And it will enable you to focus on the things that give you joy in the business, which might be things other than racking and stacking or plugging in cables.
I'm going to ask you now, Harold, for a question for our next guest. And it's beautifully teed up because this is a sales expert. So it's a field that you love, you're passionate about. And I wonder if you might have a question based on the fact that you've built a successful business without consciously focusing on the sales process. What would you ask a sales expert? What would any burning questions you have that might help you in your
Yeah,
business?
you have a good meeting with a prospect. They want to know more. They obviously want to know pricing. The choreography between that and the purchase order is still very elusive to me. How do you go from a great meeting with a prospect to a closed sale without them ghosting you or just it just happens so often, and I don't understand why it's so frequent, and how do you avoid it?
Excellent question. I'll leave it there. Our next segment Our next segment is industry manure. This is where you get a chance to let me know what grinds your gears about advice that you hear, maybe. Could be colleagues, peers, industry groups, whatever, that you just think that doesn't sit well with me.
First thing comes to mind is vendors who just promise the world. It seems that every product does everything. Having to sift through that is very difficult. In terms of tools and services that are marketed to MSPs, I would say that there's a lot of picks and shovels right now being sold to folks in terms of trying to capitalize on this opportunity. And there's a lot of aspirational purchases. I think I don't like the lack of candor that is shared by or that is advertised by so many of the providers. They paint too rosy of a picture. And I think what would be better for me is if people shared how hard it is. And I would prefer more realistic descriptions of what it's going to take to actually leverage that tool. They promise you that, oh, all you got to do is this, this, and this, and use our formula, and just start with our package. It, I don't think it's that simple. They sure make it sound that simple. I don't think it's that simple. And so if they could just share, yeah, this is going to be hard, or this is going to be really a lot of work, I think it would be more refreshing, at least for me.
I love that. And I try and keep that in mind. Obviously, the day job is sales builder when we're talking to partners about it. Often I'll start a conversation by saying, actually, you know what? The bit where you've got to link to your distributors, that can be quite time consuming. Or if this isn't unless you get your product portfolio sorted out, then this isn't going to work as well for you as you might think. And try and bring the home truth. So it's good to hear you say that, and that's something you can never really stop thinking about. I think because it's a sea of promises. You're absolutely right. Harold, tell me about your business and what's going on in your world. What would you like to get some eyeballs on? Anything interesting happening? Anything new you're rolling out? Where's your focus?
Yeah, I mentioned we are a Mac dominant MSP. So a lot of MSPs like to say, "Oh, we do Macs too." Well, Macs are actually hard to support, and I have some incredible engineers in 6 different time zones actually that are helping customers around the world manage their Macs. So we actually partner with a lot of MSPs to help them handle the percentage of Macs amongst their customer base. We have these workflow automations that do all the patching, et cetera. So it's a really nice solution. And we do a lot of co-managed IT because of it, where in-house IT departments like having all of that just offloaded, and they can just say, you know what, can you guys just patch all of our computers and our Macs? So we are available to partner with MSPs who want to be able to say yes to Mac customers or Mac dominant customers without having to sort of say no. And they can private label our service to do the patching of those devices, what we call workflow automation.
Brilliant. And I imagine there's some standout sectors for that. And there'll be people listening are thinking, actually, yeah, this isn't an area I want to specialize in. So I can totally see the demand for a partner like you. Harold, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And I really feel like we've, in that short space of time, got a good feel for the business. And it's definitely been something I've learned from in a number of areas. And I hope people listening to this will do too. Pleasure having you on. I hope I get to see you again in person maybe sometime soon. That'd be nice.
Thank you, James. I appreciate it. And people are welcome to link in with me. Mann Consulting is, we've been around a long time. I get a lot of emails. I'm happy to chat with folks. I really like helping people. Education is one of the things I think that gives me a lot of joy, just helping people be better at the job. Y'all out there, if you're an MSP, you're working really hard. You might as well enjoy it. It takes some work to learn how to enjoy this profession. But I will tell you, if you put yourself first, it all gets easier. It feels a little weird, but selfishness is the key to enjoying this career.
I can't put it any better than that, Harold. That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much. Well, that was a bit of a bumper episode, but I felt like it was totally worth it. I enjoy all my chats. I feel like it's a total privilege to do this, but really tapping into Harold's knowledge was just fantastic. And I hope, even the more experienced leaders out there will pick up something from our conversations. I hope you really got something actionable. That is, of course, always the mission on this podcast. I pulled out a few ideas worth considering, a couple to highlight for you. So, of course, the biggest client revenue share. If that is over 10% for you, then I think that's something definitely to think about, building a plan around rebalancing. Then there's the proposal side of things. So something that plays into the sales builder area, of course. If you can present more, then do. Don't give your clients loads of information, and also, take on board that huge overhead of producing these documents if it's not needed. So have an experiment with that. Think about making it okay for your team to say, I don't like this. Making it a real tool for surfacing risk and improving the processes. And really like this one, review your service menu. What could you stop doing that no one on your team enjoys? We don't often hear about that in terms of sort of how your team interacts with the services you offer. But if you focus more on delivering best in class, is that going to really end up providing a better service for your customers overall? The challenge, of course, with any of this advice is just to take one of those things from the chat and actually do something with it, implement it, execute it in your business as soon as you can. There's no time like the present. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave us a review. Keep growing, and I'll catch you next time on the next episode. Thanks again. Bye for now. That is it for this episode of Harvest. If you found this useful, all the links we mentioned are in the show notes. And of course, if you enjoyed it, please do leave us a review and share it with a friend, or even better, someone else in the industry who you know would get value from it. Until next time, happy harvesting.